The number of empty chairs on stage was thinning. When Alicia grasped the edges of the podium and yelled a name so familiar, I didn't recognize it at first. My legs, however, took her meaning immediately and propelled me into a standing position, where I believe I then exhibited all the celebratory tropes that the others had. Blushing and grinning and waving my hands in the air, I stumbled through the crowd while a trumpeter blasted out a "Here Comes the King" sort of tune. When I got to the stage, I met Alicia, who seemed much bigger up close and more freckled. She shook my hand. She slipped me a check for $1,000 and led me to the podium, where I turned and looked out at a sea of famous poets. On Sunday, I had fallen into conversation with an old man who had accompanied his poet wife to the convention. When I asked him if he thought his wife would get nervous if she had to read in front of the crowd, he said, "She will most likely have to refer to her notes because she may forget who she is." This is precisely what happened to me when I looked out at the crowd. Who was this Jake Silverstein? His voice when he began to read sounded muffled and far away. His face was a giant mask. It was a very strange sensation, and I could see how it might work on you until you just broke down and shouted "World Peace." My chair in the winner's circle afforded me an entirely new perspective on the convention. Who really gave a damn about what poetry was or what poetry wasn't? Poetry was the check in my hand. Poetry was the golden scepter only 5 chairs away. Alicia cried out, "Gladys Ogor Edom, for I'm a king's kid, Jehovah's princess." A black woman in a long black dress got up and gave a stirring performance in which she sobbed, screamed, waved her hand, stamped her feet, lost her voice, and collapsed into her chair completely spent, clutching a $3,000 check. Calvin G. Benito for Apache. A bald Oklahoman read in a somber elegy to the great tribe's warriors with their long black hair and sat down with $5,000. The moment was upon us. $25,000. Kathy L. Kaiser for I Choose to Dance. We looked around excitedly, but no one stood. Was she in the bathroom, writing more terrific poetry in her room upstairs? The initial applause had begun to peter out when all at once a buzz swept through the crowd. Fingers pointed, gasps escaped, and all eyes swung to an unused corridor of the ballroom, behind a series of mirrored pillars, where with a look of grim determination, Kathy L. Kaiser of Phoenix, Arizona, slowly advanced toward the stage in a motorized wheelchair. The applause erupted with renewed vigor. Poets on the opposite side of the ballroom hopped up onto their chairs to get a better look at the handicapped laureate. Some held their cameras above their heads and snapped photos. A wave of energetic disbelief passed from table to table. Short people asked their taller companions what the hell was going on. Wheelchairs were pantomimed and heads shaken in amazement. A cowboy poet swatted his knee with his hat. Kaiser motored silently along, her chin pressed to her chest. It was not yet time for her to celebrate. There was still the matter of what to do when she got to the stage, which had no ramp. Try to imagine the most melodramatic scene that you have ever witnessed. Now add to that tableau as many soaring eagles and galloping stallions as can be mustered. Color it in pinks and purples. Bring up the French horns. Do all of this and more, and still you would have no hope of touching Kathy Kaiser's performance that day in the Rose Ballroom. As she rolled up to the foot of the stage, the trumpeter belted out his last hurrah and fell silent. Grasping Tab Hunter, I forgot to mention, I can't believe I forgot to mention this, Tab Hunter. The famous Tab Hunter was one of the participants in all of this. Grasping Tab Hunter's suntanned arm, Kaiser took a deep breath and heaved herself up onto her feet. She was standing. Gritting her teeth, she began to struggle up the stairs, one excruciating step at a time. She was walking. Once on the stage, she shook loose of Tab's support and stood free under her own power. The crowd lost its mind. Alicia's husband, Bob, rigged out in a jewel-encrusted doublet with a white frilly collar, placed the laureate's crown upon Kaiser's head. Tab hung the robe from her shoulders and presented her with the scepter. Her coronation complete, Kaiser began to wobble across the stage toward the podium. Alicia crept along behind her, bearing aloft the leopard train. Her poem did not disappoint. A song leaps from my heart at the beginning of each new day, Kaiser began. A song with a melody that never plays a sad song. At several points, she appeared near collapse, but clenched her fists behind the podium and pushed on. "If I have the choice of sitting this one out, I will choose to dance," she chanted. "If you have a choice, dance, dance, dance." As far as raking up the judge's coals were concerned, you had to admit this was hard to top. Kaiser gave the crowd a royal nod and fell into her throne. Alicia thanked us all for coming. "See you next year," she shouted. Poets began to file out surprisingly fast. There were planes to catch. Kathy Kaiser sat in silence, a dazed look in her eyes. Her crown was tilted, sweat ran down her cheeks. Poets rushed forward to congratulate the prize winners they knew, but it did not look like Kaiser had any intention of moving, perhaps for days. Well, the other prize winners, her court, I suppose, bustled around the stage taking pictures and shaking hands and even signing autographs. Kaiser, whether with exhaustion or exultation, remained seated on her throne. Hers was a quiet reign. Within 20 minutes, it was over. Out in the hallway, I ran into Doc. I asked what he thought about the winners. "Dunno," he said. "I left. As soon as I heard that crap about dolphins and butterflies, I left." I could see where the judging was going. "We feel," another man said, "furthermore, that the time limits were unfairly imposed." Again, I forgot to mention that the poems all had to be under a minute long. "We feel, furthermore," another man said, "that the time limits were unfairly imposed. There were some on the stage who should not have been there." "She could walk," said a wiry little guy with a Hawaiian shirt and tattooed forearms. "We all saw her walking across the stage. I've been to L.A. I've seen how the panhandlers do it in their wheelchairs with their crutches." "Gentlemen," said a man with luxurious dreadlocks, "we have been duped." The man with the dreadlocks proceeded to make an allegation that I had some trouble swallowing. He claimed that Kathy Kaiser was an employee of the famous Poets Society, the idea being that by awarding her the prize money, they could fold it back into their revenue, with maybe a little bit coming off the top for Kathy's show. "A man whose acquaintance I have made here in Reno called into the office before the convention," he explained. "Today, when Mrs. Kaiser read her poem, he recognized her voice as the same one he talked to on the phone that day. We have been had." The tattooed man let out a low, long whistle. "I knew something was up," he said. "I could tell the fix was in from the way the judges were acting. They weren't even paying attention. Why not? Because they knew who was going to get the prize. I went down for my group, just trying to wake up the judges. When my turn came, I says to the guy behind me, I says, 'This is for you, buddy.' And I went out and I took a nosedive, yelling at them, doing my best Pee Wee Herman routine, jumping around on the stage like a retard, you know, just to get them to open their eyes. Well, it worked. One of the guys in my group won a prize, but I got the shaft, and I got the shaft from this other society, too. I came out here with just my shirt on my back, all the way from Jersey without a penny, and now I'm going to have to ride the train cars back, which I don't mind, because a freight car is a hell of a place to write some poetry."